Everyone is a star child, made of stardust and the infinite potential of the universe. This extraordinary fearless something in each of us clamors for freedom from the bonds of fear, conformity, and an ordinary life. Welcome to Dr. Durr's Living in the Sweet Spot, where practical tools and solutions from the intersection of mind-body medicine, science, and spiritual well-being awaken and empower you to live out your infinite potential, to live life in the sweet spot. Hello, everyone. I am your host, Dr. Balin A. Durr. And I find that all of us really want to live, a happy, fulfilled life with meaning and purpose. But many of us are actually stuck living in a life that's limited by a lot of fear, conforming to other people's expectations of who they want us to be, and just not able to therefore create a life that's meaningful, because we also are kind of stuck because of our childhood wounds. So today I am going to be having a previous guest join me, Portia Carney.
Hey there.
Yeah, so I'm so glad that you can join us today for our reoccurring segment, Unapologetically Real, right? Where
Yes.
we talk about things, where we go deeper and explore the real meanings of our experiences, and why we do things and how we go about creating what we're creating, but really don't have the understanding, and how that shows up in our relationships in our life. And so in our goddess chit chats, right?
Yes.
We bring
Yes.
we're bringing that to the platform, right?
Ooh.
And you know so it's always good to see you, and good to have you on here.
Same here.
Yeah. And so, one of the things that comes up in those conversations often, as you well know, is accountability. And so, kind of the what we're working with today, I call it, the way I describe it is 1+1 = accountability.
Yes.
And I termed it that because I find that oftentimes we talk about the other person or the other thing that's happened, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we conveniently leave ourselves out of the equation.
We
So,
do.
right.
We
And
do.
so my way of kind of bringing folks back to reality and truth is, there was the other person or circumstances or situation, and there was you.
Right.
So 1+1 equals 2, not 1 = 2, or 1+1 in this case equals accountability. And I find that that a lot of people lose sight of that. But before I kind of go deeper into that, go deeper into that conversation, I just want to kind of remind folks, just kind of remind them of who you are. So obviously, again, you have an MBA.
Yeah.
You have and you're also an entrepreneur, right?
Yes.
With
Yes.
and the name of your business is
Portia Secret.
Portia
I am
Secret.
an independent consultant for paparazzi jewelry.
Yes.
Yes.
And which
Hello, I'm looking. I'm like, oh, she is bringing it. I love it.
yeah.
I love it. And
Yeah,
thank you.
oh, absolutely, because you have some beautiful pieces, and they're actually inexpensive.
Like
So
$5. $5. The most beautiful, affordable jewelry ever.
yes. Yeah. So, A goddess can really do a whole lot to, up her game
Mm-hmm.
with 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 the paparazzi jewelry, right?
With $5.
Yes.
Yes.
So again, so one, I want to thank you for my pieces, and two, I want to just so again, so you're an entrepreneur, you
Yes.
are a manager for a major bank, yeah, a major bank, one of the big
Mm-hmm.
banks, and then you also again, as you said, you've got the two sons from your previous marriage. And I still remember our first conversation was you talking about all these things that characterize your life, and you're like, "How did I get here?"
Right. I have amazing grandchildren. Like, I
Right.
love to travel. I have great friends, and it's like, okay, so now I'm at this point.
Yeah. And I thought it was such a great question. So I think that that's actually a wonderful segue into, again, talking about today's conversation, which was, again, I think because of, our fears, wanting to conform to other people's expectations of us in order for us to fit in and to have safety. And then also our childhood wounds, that we end up with what, in psychiatry and psychology we call learned helplessness, and
Mhm.
therefore not recognizing our role. So I think the one of my favorite stories it beautifully illustrates this point, is one day a man decides he wants to go to the circus, right? And in making the decision to go to the circus, he is walking around, and he sees this elephant standing perfectly still, right?
Mhm.
And he stops dead in his tracks. And the reason he stops dead in his tracks is because he can't believe what he's seeing. And what it is there's this elephant, this big, full, adult, powerful, strong elephant, right, standing perfectly still in place and only held there by a rope tied around his leg, staked to the ground. And he can't believe what he's seeing. So he's like, let me go and talk to the trainers and find out what's going on here. And when he talks to them, the trainers tell him, he's like, oh, we got him as a baby. And the trainers go, and so he said, we tied a rope around his leg, staked it to the ground, and whenever he would try to free himself, he realized he would only could go so far, and then after a while he just gave up trying to free himself. And so that, again, that story, I think, beautifully illustrates how many of us are stuck in our heads, stuck in our childhood, our concept of ourselves as children, which is
Mhm.
small, weak, dependent, and vulnerable. And so, just like with the elephant, despite the fact that it was now a full-size adult, strong, powerful, could be independent, it still perceived itself as the small, weak, vulnerable, dependent one who was unable to free itself. And so even though it could easily rip that stake out the ground and free itself, it didn't even try.
Mhm.
So again, I think, like many of us, we're stuck thinking the same way, thinking that we're unable to free ourselves, but also not recognizing that we have the power to choose. And in having the power to choose, it makes us very powerful. But also in making the choices, then we also, um, frankly, then we want to deny our accountability for the choice. Right.
Especially when we don't view the outcome as favorable.
Like what you thinking of?
So when the outcome is favorable and there's accolades behind it, we want to be recognized and acknowledged for that choice. We want to be accountable for having a role in that decision. or that choice. But when the outcome is not favorable, well, we're quickly programmed, some of us, to point fingers at others so that we remove any accountability or minimize our accountability in it. Our accountability is based on or dependent upon someone else's actions or thoughts. This is why we did what we did. So that's what I was meaning by that part there.
Okay, so it's again, let's get into some specifics here. So one of the things that I think of is when people say, "You made me."
Ooh, that's it right there. That one right there. Well, if you had not, because you did this, you made me do that. That is minimizing the accountability. And that's touching on it, but not accepting their role in whatever the outcome was or the situation is.
Yes, absolutely. And so I was gonna say, do you remember when we were growing up and the Flip Wilson show and Geraldine, Geraldine, the the devil made me buy this dress.
Just like that shoe sale I went to yesterday. What did I tell you? They made me buy. You said no, you decided, but no, the shoe sale made me buy.
So yeah. And you know, obviously in instances like that, you know, it's fun, it's lighthearted, may not have, you know, significant, huge meaning. However, happening over time repeatedly, it does. Right. So whether it's, you know, we're maybe spending more money than we should, and you know, and maybe causing ourselves financial difficulties, but again, not taking accountability, you know, or responsibility for the choice to spend the money. Right. Based upon what, you know, again, based upon what we're thinking, what we think we're entitled to, what we think we should, how we went without as children, right? So whether it's that or whether, you know, it's in the relationships, right? So, and I think that, you know, for me, of course, relationships they're so important. And again, I think people don't necessarily realize that what they're doing is they're playing out their childhood their childhood experiences and childhood wounds with the other person. And not realizing that, then they may be holding the other person accountable for what they're experiencing. Right. So I definitely wanted to dig into that, because I think you know, that's where the you know, like I said, we're gonna go deep. We're gonna have some deep, meaningful conversation here. So I think let's get into that.
Yes. I look at this as, you know, when you and I first started, we scratched the surface. We opened the wound. Now we're peeling back the layers to the wounds to heal from the inside out. And so that, you know, when you heal from the inside out, you really see that who you show up as when you heal is a completely different person that you are as from when you show up when you're not healed or unhealed. So whereas you're healing from the outside in, you can't do that. You can't, because the outside in, you're creating this image that you really want people to see. It's not you, and you can't hold on to that. However, when you heal from the inside out, you really heal and your authentic self begins to appear. And that's what lasts longer, is who you show and who you show up as your authentic self.
So yeah, um, I think it's easier to, people, the way people characterize it is the representative, right?
Yep.
Um,
You
but I,
dress them up.
huh?
They dress them up.
Right. Um, but I think again, it's important to recognize that really so really for me, and this is how I operate from. One, every moment is really a spiritual moment, and how do I show up to the moment? And some moments it's real easy to be spiritual,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and other moments it's like
Right.
you know,
That's true.
the the unconscious self shows up, right? the unconscious self shows up, and we end up with the other person.
Yes.
So I think that the thing is, because to me every moment is a spiritual moment. Again, it's important to remember that that what we're experiencing is also representative of us, the one plus one, not just the one. And the plus one for me is, of course, how do I perceive the people and what's happening in the moment? But more than that, recognizing that I like you to say that I'm like the movie director of my own movie, otherwise my own life.
Mm-hmm.
I'm casting, the characters. People show up to audition, and I'll say, "Yes, you have the role," or "No." Thank you, or "Thank you for coming. We'll be in touch."
Right.
Um, so, excuse me. So, there's that aspect of it, and there is also there is remember that, then of course I can take responsibility for the fact, not for what you do, but for the fact that I'm choosing to be in relationship with you, and therefore expose myself to your behavior and your choices.
Mm-hmm.
So while I'm not responsible for your choices and behavior, I am responsible for exposing myself to your choices and behaviors.
Yes. And therefore responsible for my reactions, how I choose to react towards your choices and behaviors.
Correct. And also that while it may not be fun or pleasant, or it may be painful, that the other person is actually being in service to me by showing up, because they are a mirror of my beliefs and my mindset, what I think is true, what I think is not true, what I think is possible, what I think is not possible, my standards and values. They represent that. That's why, and of course, unless there's something really outside of your control that happens, like for instance, if somebody's, been abducted, or again, if they're kids, but I'm talking about as more as an adult, if it, but unless something extreme is happening or going on, then that person really mirrors us. And so they're actually showing, they're in service to us, so that we get to see parts of ourselves that we don't necessarily see.
Right.
Right. So,
Yeah.
so I think one of the, just to, really to kind of, talk, is again, how this shows up in our issues with our parents.
Mm-hmm.
And I know sometimes, and I've said this before, sometimes, um, when I'm having conversation with the men folk, and they'll be talking about the women that they chose to marry and mate with and have children with. And she did this and she did that. And, and other women, same thing. He did that. He did this, he did that. And I'm saying, and to be honest with you, I tell this to myself sometimes, is of course I chose them, you chose them. And that's the part you have to be accountable for. And then we also, again, but looking, where does that come from, right? What is
Mhm.
it? What you trying to heal? What we trying to heal?
Is the magic question. And but you have to know what you suffer from. And sometimes you're unaware of that. Like I was unaware of the things that I was suffering from.
Do you mind sharing?
Sure. Abandonment.
Okay.
Um, Definitely the abandonment. Uh, mom issues, dad issues. What was
So
the other one?
who was the abandonment by?
My father. And
Okay.
my mother. My mother was there, but she was, the nurturing was absent. The being a provider was available. So I had a provider for a mother, not a nurturer for a mother. So the emotional abandonment was there. However, growing up, you didn't know the difference between the two because I had nothing else to compare it to. So as long as
And
she was providing, that was her way of showing love, but that was you doing what you were supposed to do.
And so I think that, that's a very important point, that I want to acknowledge, and that I find most adults struggle with, including me, um, because my parents divorced when I was young,
Mhm.
but my and it would see my dad, but again, he's really emotionally unavailable. Um, but that's because of what happened to him as a child, right?
Mhm.
Um, his dad was unavailable, and whatever other difficulties or challenges that he experienced, and so uh, it can be it's very challenging when you're um, let me just say, even for myself, with doing the work to get myself to a place to acknowledge what was true versus being stuck in wanting my emotional needs met, excuse me.
Mhm.
Um, because as you pointed out too, there's an issue of your dad being unavailable. And I think too, to make the point, it also, see, the things that happen to us in the woundedness or the trauma, depending upon the severity of it,
Mhm.
is there's what we experience, but there's what happens, but our experience of it can vary. It can differ, right?
Mhm.
So so you characterize it as abandonment. And I did for a long time, in terms of the emotional abandonment. I did for a long time. And the challenge with that though is abandonment has a certain meaning to it, right?
Right.
And it's one that fuels the sense of abandonment, right?
Mhm.
So if you notice, I don't use the word abandonment, I use the word unavailable.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is because it's more neutral. I still think it's true, but it has less of, um, I think, the intense emotional charge associated with it, that um, it has less of the emotional charge associated with it, that compared to abandonment. Just
Right.
but
Yeah. When you think of abandonment, you think of somebody just intentionally leaving you in a place, like they drop you off and they never come back. However, unavailable means I'm here, I just don't connect, or I can't, I'm unaware of your needs. So I'm here, but I'm not in tune with you. So I'm unavailable to connect or understand your needs. I'm unavailable, or I'm busy, or I'm working. I have other things that are more of a priority sometimes than your needs or your emotions.
yeah, and of course, we all have to balance that, right? We in terms of sometimes we can't be there for our kids because we are working.
Right.
Right. And so I think, so one, I just want to make the point that, you can have children going up in the same household, but it's not the same experience. And
Right.
one, it's not the same experience because of who they are and their toolkit and their, mental, emotional, physical development, but also the parent is not the same, right?
Right.
You don't, even if you're born a year apart, even if you're born 10
Mhm.
months apart, there's still been time that has passed and that the parent is not really the same. It may appear that they are, but the subtle differences is that it's not the same parent. And then number two, there is the also how they respond to one child can be different than another child. So
Absolutely.
so therefore, it really isn't the same experience for both kids,
Right.
right?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Because an example of that is with my two sons. When they were small, when they were younger, I would do things with both of them together, but
Mhm.
then we would do things individually. I would do things with them separately because they like separate things. They were different in that way.
Yeah.
So even though my love for them is the same, how I love them is different because they require something different. So, yeah, that makes complete sense. That's
Yeah.
why their experiences with me are different. They share a common experience.
Mhm.
However, they have individual experiences of their own.
Right. And so how they frame it, what meaning they associate to the experiences also matters. And
Mhm.
so um um I think when you say abandoned and still and it I think it continues to feed that sense of abandonment and loss and the feelings associated with that. Not
Mhm.
saying, obviously it happened, it clearly happened. um we just want to be, of course, cautious in how what meaning we assign to it. Some people go, it's the story that we tell about it.
Right.
So because again, uh it shows up then in our adult relationships
Yeah,
and who we
that part. That part.
groundhog day.
Ooh.
It's groundhog day.
And the biggest thing is a lot of people don't know how to define how they show up. And what I mean by that is they don't ask, where does this come from? Sometimes the response is, well, that's just who I am. Because that was my initial response was, well, you have very masculine ways. And my response was, okay, I was in the military. What else do you need to know? I'm associating it with things that are masculine or deemed to be masculine, not knowing until the layers started peeling at a deeper level where that behavior came from. And it wasn't because I was in the military, it started in my childhood, not having the men in my life who were there, who were supposed to be there, do the things that they were supposed to do to secure me in that spot. And it
And it felt
escalates as you get older.
but it also fell into your mother
Yes,
to
she was a
fulfill the,
single mother.
huh?
She was a single mom.
Yes. And so I'm saying, so then it also, the male responsibilities and, the getting it done and making it happen fell to her, as opposed to
Mhm.
there having to be a balance. And so then there we are.
Here I am.
Um, and I'm saying, So now again, when you're unaware of how your childhood experiences are shaping you and driving your choices, then it becomes Groundhog Day, right?
Mhm. The shadow never goes away. No
Well,
matter where you go, there you are.
but as long as you remain unaware, I think that's absolutely
Yes.
true. As long as you remain unaware, and so I think again, we can't undo our childhoods, but in our unawareness, we attempt to repeat them over and over again, and
Right.
that's where we really, create, the unhappiness, and I think the disappointment and the sorrow, um and living an unfulfilled life when we're
Mhm.
unaware of the choices that we make and how they're creating our experiences over and over again. So again, the thing of it is I think of is having a dad unaware. I mean, excuse me, having a dad who's unavailable. And I say to people, what that did was unknowingly, it conditioned me to chase,
Yep.
right? It conditioned me to pursue men who were unavailable. Didn't know
Yes.
this consciously, right? Didn't know it consciously, because I didn't know that's again that's what was going on. But to chase or pursue men who are, or be in relationships with men who are unavailable, because that's the model, right? That's the pattern that was established.
Mm.
And but again, I think that what's important is, again, how do I sit down and say, what role do I play in this?
Right.
Right.
But you
So,
got to be willing. You can, when you ask that question, when one asks that question, they have to be willing to take responsibility.
mhm. Oh
You
yeah.
do.
Mhm.
And some people never see their role in anything because it's so much easier for them to put the full responsibility of their reactions in someone else's lap, until no matter what you say, they just never, some people will just never see it.
Correct. You're absolutely right. Some people will never see it, and we can't force them to see it, right?
Right.
You know, we can try to help them see it, but we can't force them to see it,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Uh,
It's a want. Healing is a want. Just like if it's something you want to do, no matter what it is, you'll go through the process.
correct.
If
Correct.
people want to heal, they'll go through the process.
Correct. And you can make the recommendation. I think this would benefit you. I think it would benefit us as a couple, but you can't force them to.
Yeah.
Right?
You
I
can't.
tell you, so two things. One, like, you can't go to medical school for me and I become a doctor.
And you know what?
Girl, come in. Can you please? Where was you at when I needed to do residency? How come you couldn't do my residency for me, and then me be eligible to get a medical license?
Right. And I think the other part too is that even when you make suggestions to, let's say, when I was in my relationship,
Mhm.
making that suggestion would probably would more than likely would have been received as I was telling that person what to do, no matter how I word the suggestion. I think, maybe it will, just a suggestion that we would work better, or something, no matter how you word it, that would not be received as if it was a suggestion to that, to the personalities of the men in my past. That would come off as I'm telling them what to do.
Correct. Correct.
So it was a no win.
Um,
For
well,
them.
and you're right. For some people, it is a no-win. Because again, we can't change the mindset of others. Lord knows I have tried. Lord knows
That's got to be so exhausting. Oh God.
it is. It
I know
is.
it is.
But guess what? From an accountability standpoint, of course, who is that on but me?
Right.
And it's really only until this year where I've gotten to a place where I'm just really getting okay. And it was something that I was told in residency, which is over 20 years ago, that in terms of working with patients, don't work harder at helping patients get better than they do. And I was just kind of really, obviously, really slow, like profoundly slow. That I'm just getting in there.
But sometimes you want more for people than they're capable of seeing they can deliver.
Yes.
Because I used to believe I wanted more for people than they wanted for themselves. And it's not so much as they didn't want it for themselves, but I think some people know their limitations. And whereas you may see more potential,
Mm-hmm.
some people know their limitations, and you want more for people than they're capable of delivering. And I'm like, why do sometimes I ask myself why, because I'm like you, well, why? I feel like, what age is it that children start asking the question, why? that
Right.
that part of the little girl in me has never grown up. She's, well, why?
Yes.
But I just, a lot of times, like when you and I were talking earlier, one of the things that's my downfall is I want to know the why. And I know I'm not always going to get an answer. I'm okay with that. But there are some things I'm just relentless about. It's like, but in my mind, I'm like, no, there is an answer. You just don't know what it is, but I know what it is. That's what I'm thinking in my mind, but that's not what I'm telling a person. But I had to learn to just let it go. Oh, okay. Now I may walk away like, oh my God, the answer's right there. But I have to let it go. And just like you, I've learned to I don't even probe people anymore. Whatever answer they give me now, that's fine.
You just stop asking why.
Yes.
Okay.
For
Okay.
some, for some, for
Okay.
some, because it becomes draining for me.
Mm-hmm.
And then in turn, I'm seeking understanding. They're tired of responding. It's draining for them, it's draining for me. And because now I'm understanding that the people that I constantly have to ask why
Mm-hmm.
are those people who really just want to leave things where it is when they give you an answer. Because if you ask me a question, 9 times out of 10, I'm probably going to give you more information. And then you'll say, well, why? And I'll say, well, probably I'm more willing to give it to you, and I'm going to give you more.
Mm-hmm.
But people who give you just a little bit to make you, well, to where you have to ask the question why, they're not willing to give too much more. And I kind of learned that doing interviews, if we have to constantly probe you for answers, you're not willing to give more, or you don't want to give more. So I just leave it there.
Okay.
I do. I just leave it there.
you, you said I'm gonna leave you where you are.
Yeah. One,
Right.
I save a lot of time. Two, I'm not exhausting too much of my own personal energy. Because if you want me to know more, you'll tell me more on
True.
some things, on some things.
So then let me get actually kind of circle back, which was um one, potential. We all have potential, right?
Mhm.
The atoms in our bodies were forged in stars. So we say we are all star children made of stardust. So we all have the potential of the universe within us. And but potential unutilized is just that.
Mm-hmm.
So, to your point, um, what's people's actual their potential in the sense of their ability to demonstrate that, but also what is their willingness to demonstrate that, right? Because
Yeah.
I tell people, if you have some kind of brain impairment, while you are potential, not only do you have potential, like I said, not only you have potential because you are the potential of the universe,
Mm-hmm.
but it has to demonstrate through a human brain. So if you have some kind of brain impairment, that's going to limit your demonstration
Right.
of your potential. And through the limited demonstration of the potential, again, it doesn't mean you don't have it, but there's a limit in terms of your ability to demonstrate it. And then because of that, then there's also what you have, but there's also what are you willing to do to
Right.
demonstrate potential. So I think that there's what we have, but then there's also what we're willing to do.
Right.
And I think that it's also that we have to remember that. And so that, again, coming back to accountability, that is then our choice. It's my
Right.
choice to demonstrate my potential. It's my choice to use my potential. It's my choice to and how I use the potential, right? So
Mm-hmm.
there's the accountability there in that. So there's that part of it, but then there's also, again, what tools do I have in my toolkit,
Right.
and how do I learn to use those tools? So whether it's parents, the question becomes, what tools and training did they have to be parents? Because again, the only requirement is having sex to be a parent.
Right.
And, but that requirement doesn't teach you how to be a parent. There's a whole
Exactly.
lot of other skills and tools that you need to learn to be a parent in order to parent well. And many people never learn that,
Right.
which is explaining, of course, why they're not necessarily good parents. Some parents didn't even want to be parents. They was just having sex. And that doesn't necessarily, now that there's a baby, mean that you now suddenly want to be a good parent.
Right.
However, that has no bearing upon the child, and they need to remember that too. Meaning your desire or willingness and demonstration of parenthood is not a negative reflection upon me if you don't do it well. I still have value. I still have meaning. I still have purpose, even if you don't parent well. But again, it's important for us in terms of accountability is for us to recognize where I got these patterns from. And
Right.
so where I got these patterns from, and frankly, are they working for me or not?
Exactly. And
Right.
most of the time they're not working.
So if they're not working, and that's kind of, and actually, what I wanted to get into in, this last segment is, um again, taking accountability is how do we do that? How do we begin to change that? How do we begin to do that? And because it's one thing for me to say you acted a plumb fool,
Right.
right? It's another thing for me to continue to be in relationship with you when you acting a plumb fool, over and over and over again. So, and so what's some of the things that you have done? Because clearly, we both talked about how we've, have, based upon our childhood patterns, have picked
Hmm.
the same people that from what we grew up in, and it doesn't work for us, or as I like to say, it ain't a good fit. And since we both know that, people sometimes, people tell me that, you made me mad. And I'm like, can I make you be an astronaut? No, well, then I can't make you feel anything. I can't make you mad. I can't make you feel
Right.
anything. I can increase the likelihood that you may feel it, but I can't make you.
Right.
So what's some of the things that you've done? Because, so here's the other thing too. I remember recalling this, and I said this earlier. what I know to be true is that the person I'm in relationship was a reflection of me. And I remember a past relationship some years ago where there was someone I was seeing. He was seeing someone else, but they didn't have an exclusive relationship. And so, okay. So, we're dating. And, but at one point, because we were spending so much time together, she confronted him and he lied to her. She's like, who is she? And he lied to her and said there wasn't anyone. And then later he admitted to me, he's like, you know what, I'm a coward. And I said, and I thought to myself, I said, the things that matter to me are honor, integrity, and courage. And if that's the case, then if he's lacking in those areas, then it means I'm lacking in those areas too, because, I'm involved with him. And so I said, okay, I can fix that.
Right.
Because I don't want to be acting out of that. And so what I did was, of course, I ended the relationship. And and I had also did it relatively earlier. I gave him some time to get to know me, but 4 months in, when this is where we still are, I learned from Master Yoda, who said, you stay in ish entirely too long, learn to cut your losses earlier. Of course, he used a different word, but
right. I can fill in the blanks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he didn't get a lot of my time and energies, because I'm just like, I get it. There's things you value about her, things you value about me. One is not more valuable than the other. We just bring different things to the table, which is another thing I learned from one of the other men folk in the village. And we can say that for another conversation. But the bottom line is, making that decision to end the relationship was me taking accountability, for my part in it, and how did that reflect me. And I know that in part of our conversation, you said that you had the realization that that there's some areas that you've come to realize that you struggle with in terms of accountability. So how did that process occur for you? What are the things that you did to get you there?
So it was a similar situation with yours. I was in a relationship, and one of the things that he would always say to me is that you want from others what you don't give or possess. And I started really listening to that because I realized what I was complaining to him about. So what I did was, I had a similar situation as you did. I was in a relationship, and whenever I would mention something about how I felt about something, instead of my feelings being validated, it would pop to, hey, well, you're not doing this, you're not doing that. Don't you see you're like that too? I was told you always want what you're not delivering. So I had to think about that. And when I thought about that, I thought about my list that now I don't want to call it a list, but the couple of issues that I had was the not being accountable and minimizing my feelings. I had to think about what I was complaining about to one person. And if we're mirror images, then that, unfortunately, I have to agree and say he's right. I am displaying that same thing. So, you and I talked, and you confirmed that. You was like, so if that's the case, then you have to look in areas of your life that you're not being accountable. So that's what I did. And I started realizing those spaces in my life where I was not being accountable for my actions. And what I've grown to realize is that it was in more areas than one. So the first step that I had to do was, one, recognize. Number two, recognize it. Now let me acknowledge it. Okay, so now that I know these things, finding out these things hurt, but I can't sit in the pain of it. I can't have a pity party, because at that point, as you and I discussed, having a pity party, you're just going to make excuses for yourself, which will 9 times out of 10 result in pointing the finger at someone else. So I decided to take ownership, deal with the emotion, way to work. And we were talking, and I had a moment where I was crying and laughing at the same time. They were tears of joy, but tears of pain, because I didn't realize that this is who I was and what I was doing. So, I did end the relationship, but ending the relationship at that same time was like, most people are sad that they ended a relationship, but I wasn't, because I also discovered, thanks to you, and I appreciate you so much for this, is that I was trying to prove my worth.
Mm.
And I think that's the part that became very emotional for me. And it's emotional for me now, but I'm okay with it.
Yeah.
Trying to show somebody else you are worthy. And I saw the pattern of that. The moment you said that, I saw the pattern, which is why I was begging for attention and affection and things like that. Just trying to get from that person. And once I realized that, once you told me that, it became easier for me to accept that I let the relationship go. Because all the time I found myself loving this person, like I was so in love with this person. I was so in love with this person. I shared with you, I see so much of myself in this person. Like I see so much of me in this person. And then I realized who I really fell in love with was myself. I was learning to love the person I am becoming versus the person I was. So it wasn't so much as my love for him was growing, it was me seeing myself trying to pull back these layers, and I'm loving the person that's coming out of this. And it's like a phoenix rising, yeah, I love him, but it's really true when I say, but I love me more.
Mm-hmm.
That has a totally different meaning to it.
Yeah.
So, and I'm still working on things, but that was the greatest part for me. That was the steps, is recognizing, owning it, not having a pity party, being actionable in what I want out of this. And that is, I want to see the areas I'm not showing up in or I'm not accountable. So I created my list. I have a list of the areas I'm not accountable in. And those are the areas I try to put more emphasis on when I say I'm going to do something, when something is expected of me. And I'm still, I'm doing it. It's slow, but I'm moving it. I'm taking it one at a time, one topic at a time. So
Yes.
once I perfect one, I can go to the next one and start building there until that becomes my norm.
Yes. And so what you shared was really powerful. And of course, I'm so glad that I can be, a part of your healing journey. I think that you know, you know, and that you are able to recognize that, which in your partner, really what you were drawn to was yourself, but just in a male form. And therefore, and also then realizing loving him was actually you loving you, and you could do that directly as opposed to through another person.
Yes.
So I think that that's really powerful. And I think there's also the fact that that you are taking steps again to be accountable. And I think, one of the things that I know that, one of myself and a mutual friend of ours, Frank, I tell you this, I said, the reason that he and I think when we have challenges with people most is around holding people accountable. And we're very much, I'm very much, I do what I'm saying I'm going to do. And if not, then I'm going to come back to you and say, well, I can't do that, or I don't want to do this. I want to do this instead. And, take ownership for the stuff I goof up and drop the ball with,
Right.
with my kids, whether it's with other people, whether it's you, like I forgot to, say I didn't confirm something, and then and like, well, you didn't confirm. I was like, okay, you're right. I didn't confirm. I thought
Mhm.
we understood, but you're right. I didn't confirm. So all of that. So I think, just beginning with something as simple as doing what you say you're going to do, and
Mhm.
then, and either doing that or letting the person know you don't want to or can't, and then this is what I want to do instead. But just not showing up, not keeping your word, that's a huge deal.
Right.
And something that's pervasive, is ubiquitous through all the things that you're doing in this life, in terms of your interactions and your goals. The other thing is if you're not getting what you want out of this life and your relationships, sit down
Mhm.
and say, what is it that I'm doing that's not working? If I keep planting apple seeds, in Antarctica, and them suckers don't sprout, why not? Well, because it's the wrong environment.
Exactly.
Right? So
Yeah.
it's the taking ownership of, yes, this might be what it is, but what kind of adjustments can I make in order to create the life that I want, right? How do I, do I love upon myself? Do I encourage myself? Do I affirm myself, right? Do
Mhm.
I provide support myself? Do I give myself the things that I need? Um, am I doing the things that are consistent with me becoming a doctor? Because going to clown college and now saying I'm ready to see patients, that ain't consistent with being a doctor,
Right.
right? So
Mhm.
it's, what am I doing? Is it working or not? And what changes do I need to make in order for me to have the relationships be what I want? Picking different people, right? Doing
Mhm.
different places, just whatever that looks like. The choices have to begin with me.
Right.
Adjustments I need to make the adjustments in order to, again, have the life that I want. So you know what, it's always a pleasure to have these conversations in this segment of the being, unapologetically real.
Yes.
And, so of course we'll push the pause button, because we will continue, because this is a regular reoccurring segment. But how can people reach you?
You can email me, Portia Carney at Yahoo.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, just
Okay.
email me. I'm
All
on
right.
Facebook. My page is open. It's pour_peer, POR_PIER.
Okay.
So
So so
anybody
P
can reach
so
me
P
there.
so POR underscore PIER.
Yes.
Okay. On Facebook. Okay, great. So yeah, so reach out to her, and get some of those great jewelry pieces at that fabulous prices, and and again, thank you so much for your willingness to be to share your healing journey, with myself and with others. I think it's uh, being vulnerable like that. I think
Yeah,
I think it's helpful and instrumental in the healing of others.
it
Um,
is. And thank you for having me.
oh, it's always a delight, God, as always,
Yes,
always.
Dr. Goddess. Yes.
Yes, yes, yes. So thank you everyone for joining me today, and for this wonderful conversation. I also want to let you know that I am going to be the MC of the second annual Bronzeville Neighborhood Jazz Festival on Saturday, August 5th, from 12 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. We have some wonderful musical artists that are going to be on the stage. It's free. The music's free. The parking's free. Bring your lawn chair. Come on out. Have a great time, and you do not want to miss this. It is at the at 39th and King Drive in Chicago. Again, Saturday, August 5th, from 12 p.m. to 8:30, and we will see you then. Again, I am your host, Dr. Balin A. Durr, awakening and empowering you to live out your infinite potential, to live life in the sweet spot. Thank you for joining us today in the sweet spot. Share, follow, and like us on social media. To learn more, please visit balinadurmd.com, spelled BALINADURRMD.com. Join us next week, and remember, when you heal your mind, all things are possible.